So my name is Nathaniel, presenting on behalf of St. Michael's Homes. We're a nonprofit in Toronto that offers both residential treatment and transitional housing for men who struggle with their mental health and substance use. And because it's one of the few fully nonprofits, so OHIP covered treatments in Ontario, or at least in this area of Ontario, it tends to also offer services to many of folks who have had incredibly difficult lives, either living on the streets, spending time incarcerated, coming from often incredibly difficult life situations or backgrounds. Um, and so often the services we provide don't just stop at substance dependence, or sorry, don't just look at substance dependence, but things like housing support, trauma work, stuff like that. Um, I'll just quickly pause here. I've lost the presentation slides. Are you still with me?
Sorry, Nathaniel, we have three computers on the go here. One is having gremlins and misbehaving big time. So we've got it on two other computers. And can you see it again now?
Yep, we're back up.
Okay, sorry about that.
No, that's okay. Gremlins strike at the worst of times.
Oh, they've been here all day, actually. Carry on. Next slide.
So that sunny picture there is just a St. Michael's team, and we're sort of spread across a number of different programs. I don't believe that's the next slide. Go back one.
Go back one. There you go.
Thank you. So very briefly giving people a sense of how we're trying to shift our service model and the whole point of an aftercare model. So the tradition of addiction treatment is an idea of acute treatment. So that's what we see in that first graph there. Very briefly saying there's this sense, or there's this tradition in healthcare, that if a person goes through a treatment program for substance dependence or abuse, that their health will be improved and will continue that way following treatment. However, that's not so much the reality, and in recent years, there's been a shift in healthcare theory to look at addictions treatment more from a chronic perspective. So similar to how a healthcare system would deal with something like cancer, diabetes, where yes, treatment will be beneficial, but you want to also offer some sort of continuing or ongoing care following treatment to maintain whatever gains were had, and to continue to support a person in their recovery momentum. So that's that third graph on this slide, showing that if you incorporate some sort of continued care service following treatment, you expect to be able to maintain health gains. And really the main goal we try to work towards with that sort of service is duration of involvement. So any sort of clients involved with us, the main goal we want to have is that they continue to see us, they continue to work with either case managers, myself, come to our groups over time, as a way to, again, maintain momentum, rather than just giving someone one bout of treatment. So that's where things stand right now, and that's where we're at about a year ago, where we got funding in for this new aftercare program from the Trillium Fund. And we're actually at 1 year to the day anniversary of us having aftercare, so a little celebration over here. If you could switch to the next slide, please. Thank you. So very briefly speaking about the problem we're looking to address and our aim statement. So in thinking about the different things that we might have wanted to address with quality improvement, we recognized that an important thing to address was enrollment into aftercare service, where looking at the numbers, and now we have an up-to-date of the past year in this graph, around 62%, so that median there, around 62% of the clients who come out of our treatment program, so that's coming out of a residential treatment for substance dependence, don't actually come and get involved in aftercare services. So they might only attend at most one session before dropping out, before no longer being in contact. That's something we really want to change, because we figured once people do get involved, so spend maybe 2 or more sessions in aftercare, that they're likely to continue with it. So Big Dot aims to increase a number of persons enrolled into aftercare program, and then for the specific aim, we are looking to increase that enrollment by about 30% come end of March 2019. And next slide, please. And just taking a drink, give me a second. So going through all the diagnostic tools, we identified around 3 root causes in our treatment program and that transition into aftercare that we'd want to address for change ideas. So the first being housing. As I said earlier, many of the clients who come into our residential treatment have also had to spend considerable time living on the streets, in shelters, going through the detox system, and very much struggle to find adequate, affordable, or stable housing. And because they don't have that housing, they're very much less likely to maintain either contact with aftercare or the recovery work, because they're more likely to fall back into their old habits of use in the same communities that they'd use with. Second, discharge. Part of the traditions of addiction treatments is that persons might be discharged from that programming with very little notice. So say, for example, in relapsing, possibly not fulfilling certain responsibilities or aspects of their accountability programming. We've done everything we can, or we've done a lot to reduce that punitive nature of our program. There's still aspects of it there. And so if a person's discharged unexpectedly, they're much less likely to continue with recovery work and might fall back into a full-blown relapse. And then finally, aftercare normalization. So like I brought up with CMHA, although we had this new aftercare rule, it wasn't necessarily standardized for all clients to receive information about it, to be given, the details for how to be admitted or be enrolled in the program, and it wasn't necessarily integrated into the treatment program. Next slide, please. And so just briefly touching base again, so because the main problem was looking at that low enrollment, that's also our main outcome measure that we're looking at. And if you go to the next slide, we also talk about our balancing measures. And this one is really important. Oh, next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. So this one's really important. Yeah. So this one's really important, where if we're increasing the enrollment into our aftercare services, we want to make sure that a person's still participating in a certain number of sessions. So right now, on average, a person will participate in about 6 one-on-one sessions of either case management, counseling, relapse prevention work in the first 3 months following treatment. We really want to make sure that that didn't decrease or wasn't affected. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we come to change ideas, and I'll give one of the examples of change ideas that came up. So we were looking at the issue of housing instability for clients following treatment. And so a change idea, so what if we have a standardized housing support as part of treatment that would then essentially integrate or transition into aftercare, so a service or a type of support that'd be existing throughout. So what we want to do is, say, for example, have housing support offered to all treatment clients. The aim that everyone is completing applications. You see on the right side there, I have forms from Harbor Light, Homes First, CRC Self-Help. Some of you might be familiar of completing these really long, arduous applications to try to get people sliding scale housing in the city. So we had this change idea saying, okay, so what would it look like if we did this for everybody, to increase the probability that by the time they're finishing or they're leaving treatment, they have some sort of housing on the go or coming up on the horizon. But as you'll see, this is a high leverage, but also really, really high effort change idea. So yes, it could have really, really great benefit, but we're having to do a lot of work right now to figure out how to integrate this into the treatment program, who's going to do it, how do you manage those divisions of responsibility. Next slide, please. And that's kind of been the conclusion or the overall status of a lot of the quality improvement work completed so far for aftercare here, where the expectation for PDSA cycles is you have your plan, you do your study, your act, but so far it's mostly just been plan for us. In that is not necessarily a bad thing. Where, as I said earlier, we're coming to a year of having the aftercare program, and it's really in its nascence. So there's still a lot of fiddling to be done. We're in the process of doing ongoing focus groups to evaluate both client experience as well as improve the way that we deliver aftercare. So it's not necessarily a surprise that the change ideas that came out of the E-QIP process are much more about program redesign or reimagining as opposed to increasing efficiency or increasing the effectiveness of the program just yet. Next slide, please. And that's exactly what I'm saying here, where some of the challenges with E-QIP process, yes, it'd be difficult to mobilize our organization as a whole or to mobilize staff collaboration around it just because of our very, very small organization. And that led to difficulty in picking up that PDSA momentum. But it's also just, I think, a result of where things are with the aftercare program right now. Because if we go to next slide, next slide, please. So if we go to next slide, I very, oh, no, go back one, please. Thank you. And thank you so much for your patience with this. It's probably not easy trying to coordinate changing slides with some random person speaking, so thank you so much. So looking at this slide, I very firmly believe that the discoveries we got out of the E-QIP tools were very, very, very helpful. So either in doing things like the process diagram and coming up with change ideas and doing the different diagnostics, that was all very, very beneficial to us slowly redesigning how we want to do things here. And I think made it clear about our next steps in meeting with different aspects of our team. We often came to the same conclusions, but amongst different members of our team. And that says a lot about the firm sense of what we need to do for change ideas and revising the program. Next slide, please. So what will we do differently? And I've spoken a lot with our executive director about this as we put our heads together to figure that out. In particular, realizing the own limitations caused by the size of our organization, but also the strengths that come of that. We're looking to build our own QI committee to essentially have that QI work done in-house. That way, our programs aren't necessarily stretched so thin with having one or two members trying to attend an external program, but it's all in-house, that we're all meeting together to put our heads together on this, and that we would want to integrate the change ideas and PDSA cycles. So rather than doing all the change ideas and doing the driver diagram all at once, which might lead itself or give itself more to having those large-scale program redesign ideas. Instead, we want to come up with the PDSA ideas on the fly and test things out more rapidly with the aim to do more of that efficiency work. Finally, for impact here, really what we're looking towards is having a much larger, fully fledged outpatient programming as part of the suite of our substance dependence and addiction-related services. That way, something like continuing care can be offered in a much more comprehensive way and isn't only given as like necessity to people who are in housing. So all the work we're doing right now is really laying the foundations for that outpatient programming. Next slide, please. And finally here, so we talk about next steps for the progress improvement. And I mean, in a lot of ways, the sky's the limit. I myself, I'm really excited about the idea of continuing care and looking to see that shift in healthcare sector in Ontario of the different aspects of healthcare. Persons who struggle with addictions are still very much treated with discrimination and excluded from quality service. So looking to see those cultural shifts. So say, for example, the Charting the Path document was just created by a CAMH team, looking at the importance of continuing care. That was just released in November. Seeing industry shift, so possibly presenting at places like AMHO. And then finally, policy shift, the fact that we receive funding from OTF for this sort of work is really, really encouraging. And I hope that as we get great results through this and through the improvement through things like E-QIP, that'll also allow for other programming in the province to do similar. And that's it for me.
Thanks, Nathaniel. All right. Questions for Nathaniel? Not so far. So it sounds like you're meeting the objectives of both Trillium and also coming along with some great change ideas and starting to implement those.
Yeah, so we're so the change ideas that came out of the driver diagram will certainly be useful. Unfortunately, it's just taking a lot of work to figure out that integration process. So whether it's about involving new programming in treatment, offering new materials, that doesn't quite lend itself yet to a PDSA cycle, I don't think, but would likely come into that phase down the line once we had it all started up.
Okay. All right. So I don't see any questions for Nathaniel or hands up.